The anonymous author of the Gospel of Matthew, writing close to the end of the 1st century, penned the following words upon the lips of his legendary leader, Jesus.
Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them.
Well then, what are we to make of the voluntary martyrs of the ante-Nicene period, whose blind and zealous dedication to the suicide cult saw their bodies burned, beaten, and devoured by lions? These manipulated martyrs' suicidal ambitions provoked numerous Roman officials to plead with them to stop aggressively goading their own martyrdom, with one Roman proconsul exclaiming, "Unhappy men, if you are thus weary of your lives, it is so difficult for you to find ropes and precipices? Who are we to make of the Church's pact of that vile and vicious emperor who relished in his own son's execution, and of whom it was recorded boiled his own wife alive? And should we also fail to acknowledge that had they not formed this alliance with Constantine, Christianity would probably have not been a major religion today? In what manner do we apply Matthew's teachings to the brutal acts of the Christian emperor Theodosius, whom Christians adoring refer to as, quote-unquote, the Great, a man who was politely pardoned by the church for slaughtering over 7,000 men, women, and children in a single sadistic rampage? How should we reconcile this anonymous author's words with the heinous murder of the brilliant female pagan philosopher Hypatia? This noble, virtuous, and enlightened woman, who taught philosophy, mathematics, and other branches of valuable knowledge, had her clothes stripped from her own body in a church in Alexandria, her skin shaved off by sharp tiles, and her bleeding body burned to the true Christians, one of whom was called Peter the Reader, and he took great pleasure in reading from the very pages of that rancid fruit manufacturing manifesto, the Holy Bible, and her flesh sizzled and crackled and the flames kindled by the faithful. If these fruits don't appear poisonous enough, how do we begin to interpret the words of Matthew in the face of the innumerable crimes committed by the numerous vicars of Christ, whose murderous exploitations knew no bounds? And what should we make of the popes today? Those theological descendants of St. Peter who deny life-saving protection to HIV-ridden countries, and who made it their business to carefully conceal and protect pedophile priests? How do we understand the words of this dishonestly named gospel in relation to Martin Luther's commissioning of the mass slaughter of Anabaptists and peasant men, women, and children, of his violent exhortations to slaughter the Jews wherever good Christians should find them? And what about Calvin's foul deeds? Are we allowed to keep these verses in mind when we reflect upon the murder of Michael Sherlock, who, at the behest of Calvin, had his body beaten and burned as he struggled for breath and bravely clung to life while his flesh excruciatingly dripped from his bones? Do we pay heed to the Gospel of Matthew's advice when we examine St. Francis Xavier's brutal Inquisition in Goa? This Christian Inquisition, at least in the words of contemporary and modern Catholic historians, resulted in some of the most appalling crimes ever committed. In the words of one Catholic historian, the Inquisition laws filled 230 pages, and the palace where the Inquisition was conducted was known as the Big House, and the Inquisition proceedings were always conducted behind closed shutters and closed doors. The screams of agony of the victims, men, women, and children, could be heard in the streets in the stillness of night as they were brutally interrogated, flogged, and slowly dismembered in front of their relatives. Eyelids were sliced off, and extremities were amputated carefully, so that a person could remain conscious even though the only thing that remained was his torso and a head. How should we go about reconciling these falsely attributed teachings to the misogyny, homophobic, pedophilia, simony, larceny, witch burnings, heresy hunts, crusades, and all of the other despicable deeds committed by this profane religion? And if we were to present these rotten fruits to the mysterious author of Matthew, what do you think he would have to say about it all?
By their fruits ye shall know them.